So I think one of the real reasons that we have a crisis of truth right now is the social media platforms themselves. They reward enraging behavior and give that more engagement on platforms. And so we see everybody from influencers to politicians using that in their own tactics for power and for profit in order to hasten more polarization and get more power and profit themselves. Is it different than tactics of the past? Perhaps not, but the information travels more quickly and it is more targeted to audiences that are going to be more vulnerable to it. I'm not sure if I have any new suggestions to counter disinformation, but one thing I've seen throughout my research in Central and Eastern Europe that works is making sure that countries are investing in information literacy. This is not a panacea, it's not going to solve everything, but it does give citizens the tools they need to navigate an increasingly crowded information environment, understanding why they're getting certain information, where it's coming from, and how to tell good, trustworthy information from information that might be less trustworthy. And that's really important when citizens are making decisions at the ballot box. So I think what we've seen with changes in online behavior mostly has to do with foreign entities. As content moderation has gotten better on the side of the social media platforms, we've seen foreign entities understanding that they can't just buy, election ads in rubles anymore. Instead, they're doing what's called information laundering. So they're planting narratives with authentic local actors, local voices, so that it makes it more difficult to moderate. Because if you have somebody who's a legitimate voter in a country, working on behalf of a foreign entity secretly, content moderators at Facebook or Twitter or wherever else are going to be less likely to moderate that content because that person has a right to their free speech. And that's where we get into some of the sticky issues with content moderation. People don't necessarily want to see unelected representatives moderating the discourse in their town square. And that's why I think we need more transparency, more oversight, more regulation, so we understand how these platforms are making the decisions, why they're making the decisions, and we have recourse and appeal if we're able to do that. So we did see a little bit of an exodus to alternative platforms when content moderation efforts stepped up a little bit. But actually, some research that I've done on online abuse of women shows that people are still lingering on those mainstream platforms like Facebook, like Twitter, like TikTok. And in particular, when it comes to abuse, we theorize that this is because they like to yell at their targets of abuse, not just about them. So I think there's still, a quorum, you might say, on platforms that are mainstream, and we don't see as much of a quorum on those smaller platforms. There's a little bit less bad energy to go around there, and so people want to be where they can argue, where they can connect, where they can butt heads with people online, unfortunately. I think one of the most important things that might seem kind of trite is that all women need to make sure that they are taking care with their IT security. This means complex passwords, it means using two-factor or multi-factor authentication, and it means maybe using VPNs. The other thing that women can do that's really important is recognizing that there are tools on these platforms to make the experience a little bit easier for you. You can report, you can mute, you can block people who are abusing you, and while the platforms may not always take your recommendations about reports, it sends important information to them to understand who is abusing the terms of service and who's not. I want all the women who are watching this to remember that your social media profiles are not a democracy. They are your kingdom or queendom, I suppose. And you should do whatever you feel is necessary to have a good experience on those. So that's the most important thing that I think we all need to keep in mind. You don't owe anybody your time or your energy, and there are tools there that you can use to make the experience a little bit nicer. Women in public life are unfortunately subject to a lot more harassment, abuse, and threats than their male counterparts. And especially if you're a woman of an intersectional background, that is just doubly or triply true. It's an unfortunate fact, but you can be prepared. You can take the necessary IT precautions. You can build a community around you so that if you find yourself in that situation, you have support. The other thing that I think is really important for any employers and managers watching this is that we recognize that to have people active in public life, to make sure that our employees feel confident in using their voices, we have a duty to support them as well. Make sure that they feel comfortable speaking out, and that you're going to support them if the worst does happen, with legal support, with moving them to a safe location if they're doxxed. All of these things, having that in writing so that your employees feel fully empowered and like you've got their back, is really critical to preserving that space that women in marginalized communities have fought so hard to get online. I actually think one of the biggest challenges ahead for FEME and for disinformation is the attacks that are on researchers right now who are working on these issues. There are people all around the world, but in particular in the United States, who have been doing research in support of the truth for the past several years and are finding themselves at the pointy end of lawsuits and in congressional investigations just for the work that they've done, because that work is endangering people's political power and profit. And I think that is really, really dangerous, and we should be allowed to have academic inquiry and research like this without fear of repercussions, both in terms of our livelihoods and our safety. And that's happened to me, it's happened to many of my colleagues, and I think as we head into an extremely important election year, it's not a mistake that this is happening now. It's happening now in order to precisely stop these efforts ahead of an important election year. And so I think we all need to stand up for our colleagues who are in that space, who are feeling the brunt of this right now, and we need to make it known that that's not okay in a democratic society.